Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to connect authentically, build strategically, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time for women to embrace that they are powerful at their core and to leverage their expertise, resources, and relationships to build their business, their brand, and their badassery. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins, and we invite you to subscribe to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Our episodes drop every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. So listen, enjoy, share, and subscribe. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. We have another amazing episode and yes, an awesome guest. And I always say awesome guest, but it's true because I make sure that I handpick everyone who comes on the Ladies Who Leverage podcast because it's also about making sure that you are empowered, that you are entertained, and that you are educated. And today we have a great friend here who's going to teach us all about community and marketing and just all of the great stuff. And her name is Lindsay Pinchuk. And Lindsay is an award-winning entrepreneur, consultant, community builder. I know a lot of you are building communities. She's a connector, a storyteller, expert marketer, social media maven, a spokesperson, on-air expert, small business champion, and a mom. In other words, a woman after my own heart, just doing all of the things and doing them well. So let's give you a little bit about her background, though, in terms of how did she get to being all of these amazing things. So at one point in her life, with $500 in her pocket and a baby in her belly, she left her high-powered job as a magazine publishing executive and founded her first company. She turned a profit in year one and less than a decade later led her company's acquisition to a large agency holding company. Lindsay has lent her expertise to Time Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, Crane's Business, and 200 plus TV segments. So she is a woman to watch. Today, she works with businesses, both large and small, to tell their brand story, grow the communities to support them, generate multiple revenue streams, and ignite their success both on and offline. And she just also launched her podcast, Dear Founder. So that was on January 6th. So make sure that you subscribe not only to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, but to the Found Her podcast. Lindsay, welcome.
Thank you so much. That was the nicest introduction, Kelly. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we've had, Lindsay and I have just had a long conversation even before we start here. So she's amazing and I can't wait for you to meet her. So Lindsay, I said all these things about who you are. Give us a little bit though about your background and how you got into entrepreneurship before we dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me. So in 2010, I was pregnant, though when I started Bump Club, I was not pregnant yet. I just had this idea of forming a community for pregnant women because I had some pregnant friends who had no pregnant friends. And they would ask me questions about what the other was thinking. And I kind of was like, I'm not there yet. Like not that I don't love you, not that I don't care, because I do, but I'm really just not there. So why don't you guys talk to each other? And there really was just no place for community when you were pregnant, and especially in Chicago, like locally. And I say this because this is before, Facebook business pages existed. This is before Instagram was a thing. There was no Snapchat, no TikTok. The social media was really a different beast then than it is now. And people were still very much getting together in person. This was before the pandemic. And so I really wanted to create a place for expectant women to connect with one another while they were pregnant. When you become a mom, it's so easy to find people and find your community. It's kind of like when you have a dog and you're walking the dog, right? And you meet other dog owners and you're like, oh, how old's your dog? How old's your dog? It's the same thing when you have a baby and you're pushing them in a stroller. You're like, how old's your baby? Oh, and then you might exchange numbers. It's a very easy icebreaker. So before I was pregnant, I decided that there needed to be some kind of community in Chicago for expectant women. And I actually was very lucky. I got pregnant very quickly. And I ended up announcing my first event for Bump Club about 3 weeks before I announced my pregnancy. So it was a little awkward because people didn't understand why I was hosting events for expectant women. Although I'm sure people knew it was on the horizon. And so in any event, I started hosting events for expectant women in Chicago, and very bare bones marketing. When I say bare bones, I mean, I sent an email to everyone I knew. I posted it on my LinkedIn. I posted it on my personal Facebook, and I asked people to let people know, do you know anyone who's pregnant? Let them know that I'm having these events. And the first few events that we had were very basic. They were like a prenatal workout, a shopping event. They were free, but they filled up. And when I say filled up, people were RSVPing, and not only were they RSVPing, they were showing up. It was very clear that women in Chicago at that time that were pregnant wanted to connect with one another. And after the first few events, people said, well, what's next? What's next? And so I was pregnant, and I put myself in their shoes, and I said, okay, well, I need to know all of these things before this baby arrives. So we started hosting educational dinners and seminars. Everything was in person. And eventually my daughter was born, and I assumed that I would, take my maternity leave from my real job, which was my magazine publishing job. But instead I worked on Bump Club the whole time. And when it was time for me to go back to work, I went back, but I very much knew that my heart was with this new entity, and I wanted to give it a shot. And my husband and I figured it out how to do it financially. And I decided I was going to leave my job in publishing and give it a shot. And I kind of, in the back of my head, was like, what's the worst that happens? I always ask myself that. What's the worst that happens? It doesn't work out, and I go back and get a job. I never looked back. And 8 years later, we were hosting events for Nordstrom, Target, The Honest Company. We were creating activations that were inherent to Bump Club. They were our own activations and events. Hundreds of brands were paying us for sponsorships. We had this audience, this community that we had built over the course of time, who relied on us. They trusted us, and they showed up for us just as much as we showed up for them. And in 2019, I was approached by a few different entities, and I felt that I needed the resources to continue moving forward. And I just couldn't go at the pace that I was going at anymore on my own. And I made the decision to sell Bump Club to a large agency holding company. And so that is how I got into entrepreneurship.
Wow. It's funny that you started out thinking about something and creating a community that you weren't even a part of yet. And I think sometimes when people are thinking about entrepreneurship or business ventures, and they may get discouraged, right? Either they discourage themselves, or other people discourage them because they're like, well, what do you know about that? You're not even a part of that. But you were able to see that there was this gap, and then you became part of the community. But I mean, the idea came out of just watching and listening and seeing what was there.
Totally. And I knew that I had hoped, I didn't know, because you don't know. I had hoped that I would eventually become part of that community. I didn't realize it would happen as fast as it did. But I saw my friends, and I saw them, I don't want to say suffering, because by no means were they suffering, but they definitely needed the support of each other. And I was trying to put them in touch with each other, but geographically they weren't in the same places. And they needed a place where they could meet and come together with people who were going through the same thing as them. And I'm so glad I did it when I did it, because I was able to reap the benefits. And, I say it was like the stars aligned when I announced this business and I got pregnant. And I'm so grateful every day that I was able to benefit from what I created. But I also was able to benefit, my business was able to benefit by me showing up every single day as an expectant parent, and then a parent, and then an expectant parent again.
Right.
And, you and I kind of talked a little bit about community, but that's how a community starts. Someone has to take the helm and take the reins and put themselves out there and say, like, girls, I need this. Like, my ankles are swollen and I am itchy. And are you? Because when someone isn't putting themselves out there and asking the God's honest questions, it doesn't have to just be about pregnancy. It could be about anything. I'm doing the same thing now with entrepreneurs. So it's, there's questions there that are they're pain points for entrepreneurs, just as there are pain points for expectant women. So yeah, to your point, like I did feel that there was a need, and I'm so glad I was able to show up and fill that gap for so many millions of families.
Yeah. And so, we watch entrepreneurs, and especially you see Facebook and you see all the things coming up. And so many people now are thinking about community, right? And the importance of community. Why do you think, Lindsay, community is so important? And especially as entrepreneurs, as you start to build your business, I was talking to you about building the ecosystem around Ladies Who Leverage, and part of it is the community, right? But why do you think it was so important? And what did you see coming out of those women being able to come together that made it so powerful?
So I always tell my community now and my clients on a daily basis, as much as you want an audience, of course you want an audience, but you want a community 1,000 times more. And the reason being is an audience is someone who watches you and sits back and maybe consumes what you're putting out there. But a community is a group of people who are not just consuming what you're putting out there, but they are engaging with you, and they are going back and forth with you. And it's not just about you and what you put out there. It's about what they put out there and how you can gain from that as well. And also, it's not just you going back and forth with them, it's them going back and forth with each other. Right? Like, I mean, we all have so much to learn from one another. And I always found, especially with Bump Club, like I said, I showed up as an expectant woman every single day and I shared my birth story. There was no like Facebook Live then, so it was all in a blog post. But I shared about like the intricacies of me giving birth to my first daughter and my second daughter. And I would have people come up to me on the street in Chicago and say like, "Oh my God, like, thank you for sharing that." Like, but they knew what had happened. And like, like a lot of it is blocked out of my head at this point. But, and so by putting yourself out there, it's an open invitation for people to put themselves out there. And now I feel like I did with Bump Club, and now with my new Dear Found Her community, that when you put yourself out there and you invite people to engage back, you also have the ability to tap into them, to ask them questions, to ask them what they want, to ask them what they need. When I built Bump Club legitimately on what my audience and community needed. I mean, I asked them, they voted, they picked what topics we were going to cover. They decided, what strollers we were going to feature. I mean, they decided. I asked them, and I responded by meeting their needs. And that's really what community is, and why it's so important, is because you want to have that two-way street. Ultimately, when you have a community who trusts you and who believes in you and who subscribes to you, they will also eventually become your customers because they'll transact with you.
Yeah. And Lindsay, there's a lot of discussion now around community and whether communities should be free communities or communities should be paid communities. What are your thoughts around that? Because I have my thoughts, but what are your thoughts around whether communities should be paid or free?
I think there are different levels to community and paying and free. I mean, here's the thing. I think as a business owner, it behooves you to show up and to serve your community for free. I do. I think that you get a lot more in return, especially by way of transaction, when you put yourself out there and you share things. And I don't think all content should be paid. I don't, but I do think that there then becomes this level when people subscribe to you and they want more from you. And you're showing up and teaching and giving them actionable steps to take, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, that should be paid content. But I do think that to some degree, you have to show up and share for free, because you have to let people know that you're an expert in all of these areas. And they also have to know that they subscribe to you. You're not going to be for everybody, right? Like, not everyone.
You don't want to be.
No, I don't want to be for everyone. And that's okay. If you don't like me and you don't like what I stand for, we live in America. That's you're right. But I do think that you have to kind of figure out what it is you are willing to put out for free and what it is you want people to pay for. And even like now in my kind of Lindsay Pinchuk 2.0, I put out a lot of free content. I show up live all the time. I answer questions, and a lot of that content will show up in my courses and in my workshops, but you get me on a different level.
Yeah.
In that regard, right? And like, you have the ability to ask me more targeted questions and for me to help you in a more customized way. And it's just a different way of showing up. And so I think though it's important to give people a taste of what you're all about and to give them free content. I don't think everything needs to be paid for. And I will say with Bump Club particularly, we grew this audience to be, or in this community to be huge. And ultimately we monetized it, not just from ticket sales and people paying to come to seminars and webinars, but eventually what ended up happening was sponsors ended up paying for free events. So like we had free programming with Target. It was all free. And Target and all of the baby brands paid they sponsored it. So we had such a large audience that we were able to monetize with a sponsorship. And so I think that you also have the ability to do things like that when you grow a community and you have an engaged community. But I will say that it's a different person that shows up for the free content than it is for the person who's invested and pays.
Yeah.
And you should never be afraid to ask for people to pay for your time and to pay for your knowledge and to pay for your abilities. The right person will show up and pay.
Yeah. And I think that's what some of the rub is, right? When you're talking about free content. And, back in the day when we didn't have a Facebook and we didn't have all the things that we have now it's easier in terms of, you can show up live on an Instagram, you can show up live on Facebook and just talk, right? And you can give information. And like you said, I always talk to the women who are in Ladies Who Leverage about when you're doing those things to talk about the what and the why and have people pay for the how. Right. So which is what you were saying, in terms of you might hear some of the same stuff, but if you come into the community or if you pay for it, now you get a deeper level. Right. So I'm going to tell you how to do it. And you can ask me a directed question about your particular situation. But
yes,
but community is so important, right? There, I always say to the women and Ladies Who Leverage, there is power in association and proximity is power. Right. And so pulling people together in this community. And I think some people don't understand the value of community. And I want you to explain this, Lindsay, because it's not in a way that is not even connected to the community itself. But when I talk about the value of community, having that community allowed you to exactly what you were just talking about with sponsorships, and then being able to actually build your company to a point where it was so valuable to be sold. So can you talk about that part of community, on the other side of not just the people connecting, but the value in building that?
Of course. So when you have community and you have people connecting and you have people connecting with you, there's a level of engagement. And that's really kind of that next level is the engagement factor, because like, I'll give an example, like you could have an Instagrammer, right, who has 1 million followers. Well, they might all be bots. And so there's no engagement. And so you might have a brand pay $100,000 to show up on that person's Instagram. But if they don't have engagement from a community that trusts them, that brand has just wasted the $100,000. And, it's very interesting. So when I think about Bump Club, this is actually a really good example. So we had about 120,000 Facebook followers when I left, and we built that totally organically. We never bought a follower a day in our lives. And we were doing a program with a very large, very well-known CPG company. They had 300, 400,000 Facebook followers. They wanted to broadcast our live event on our page and on their page. And I thought like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Of course we're going to do like I will go to the ends of the earth to find the technology to be able to do that. And I did, not just because they were my customer, but because I also thought that it would benefit us. So we run the live stream on both pages. We had, I don't know, a few hundred people watching live. That's just the live. And then, you get the residual effect after, and after there's thousands of people who see it. I think they had 20 people watching live. And to me, there were so many indicators with that, right? I mean, one, my guess was that they had probably bought a lot of followers. Two, they had never nurtured their followers and conditioned them to show up and engage with them. And so when I sold my company, I might not have been as big as some of the other parenting publishers that were out there, but the company who bought me weren't just, they weren't buying just the Bump Club brand. They were buying the engagement that my audience and my community together, even the people who didn't engage with us on a regular basis would engage with the brands. Do you know what I mean? So they were still part of a community to some degree, although I would lump them in more of an audience play. If that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. I know I'm
No, you are.
So, but so that was really what they were buying. They were buying this group of parents and parents to be who were engaged with us and engaged with the brands that we worked with. And that's what's important.
Yeah. And engagement is a huge thing. And I know that that's a huge thing that lots of communities have trouble with. So if you were to give the audience, right, those who are listening and those who will watch at some point, one piece of advice about how to really get people engaged, what would that be?
You just have to be yourself. I mean, honest to God, don't hem and haw over perfection. Please don't read. Do not read. I've been watching, I'll see Instagram and I'll see someone's eyes go, back and forth, they're reading a prompter. Don't do that. If you need to make some notes, sometimes I make some notes and I'll say, right. There's some things I want to make sure to talk about with you guys. So I have my notes, but it's not a verbatim thing. Don't do that. Show up as yourself and don't always be perfect, because people don't want to buy from someone who's the epitome of perfection. They want someone who they can relate to. You have to be relatable. And I felt with Bump Club that I was very relatable in the sense that I detailed my parenting journey and I allowed people to ask me questions, and I, talked about my gestational diabetes. And I mean, I really and truly shared everything. And people would come up to me at events like they knew me. And, I thought it was kind of weird because that was not how I envisioned this going, but it was what I had created. And it is, sometimes weird as I thought it was also so endearing because people were listening and I was resonating with people very similarly to what I'm doing now. I talk about the struggles of being an entrepreneur. This is not a rainbows and unicorn thing. Yeah. And all too often we hear stories of people who sold their businesses for billions of dollars, but you don't hear the shit that they go through to get there. And it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah. And there were times when I didn't pay myself and because I was paying my employees. Or, there were times at the end of the year that I literally was sick over oh my God, are we going to have enough money to make payroll? And those are the real struggles of bootstrapping your own company and being an entrepreneur. And that's why for me, it was such a big relief when I sold it, because I just wanted to let it go at that point. I wanted to run the things that I wanted to run. And I didn't want to deal with the operations and the HR anymore.
So then with Founder, is that the name of your new community, Founder?
So my podcast is called Dear Founder. Mm-hmm. And the Facebook community is called Dear Founder, but everything that I'm doing is operating under my name, which is Lindsay Pinchuk. So there is a Dear Founder Instagram page, but it is really focused on the podcast and my guests that are on the podcast. But yes, that is my new community.
So tell me, like, what are you focused on now? So before Bump Club was obviously moms and pregnant women and expecting moms. So what is your focus now?
Now, my goal is to help support female founders and entrepreneurs. They don't have to be female. And I actually have 2 clients that are male. So, which is great. And I love that they believe in me enough to help them with their business. So I am helping them to start, found, or grow, nurture, and eventually put them on the path to sale their business. And really and truly, I want to help founders find success, whatever that means to them. So now I have some clients that only have me working on marketing. I have some clients who only have me working on social media and helping them create their story and their content journey. It really kind of depends on what it is my client for one-on-one work is really looking for. But from the Dear Founder community, it's really supporting and lifting up the community and making sure that they have stories and examples and actionable tips that they can take that are not, I didn't have that. Really and truly, I so many times felt alone and felt like no one knows what I'm going through, and shit, I can't share it with my employees because they'll run for the hills. So, I want to give founders that sense of belonging and let them know that 1, you can do it, and 2, you don't have to do it on your own. And so that's really the goal in what I'm doing, and really the legacy that I want to leave. And ultimately, legacy is a big word for me right now. My living legacy is my daughters. I have 2 daughters, and everything I do in my life is with them in mind.
Yeah.
And this new chapter of my life really came out of a lot of things in a lot of places, but I wasn't happy. And so they felt my unhappiness. And I didn't want them to think that they had to stick through something that didn't make them happy. I didn't want them to see me doing that. And that's why I made that change. And so now when I'm thinking about my legacy, it's not just for all of the people in the community, but I'm really thinking about my daughters and their generation, and what is the legacy that I can help leave to make them believe that they can do anything they want to do and they can be successful at whatever it is they put their mind to.
Yeah. I love that you said that, you don't have to stick to it. I did a podcast where it was just me. I wasn't interviewing anyone. I was talking about personal leadership, and I was talking about that whole thing about course correcting and making sure that we don't get hung up on this whole thing about finish what you start, right? I think you should finish things, but if you start it and it's not the right thing, or it wasn't making you happy, then figure out where you need to change and go finish that, right? You don't necessarily have to finish what you start, because what you start may not be the right thing.
Absolutely. And I feel that I finished what I started to my ability and capability.
That's right.
I finished on my terms. And that was a really important thing to me as well. I didn't have to be there anymore. I loved my community. And it was a really hard decision to let go of something that you've built and that you loved, and I still do. I love Bump Club and I hope that it succeeds. But in leaving it, I also had to come to terms with the fact that I have no control anymore, and it might not be around forever because it's not under my control anymore. And I had to be okay with that. So I finished on my terms, and I did not want to stick around and finish on someone else's terms. And I felt I took it as far as I could. And I am no longer a new parent. I am no longer pushing strollers, and I no longer really wanted to be the face of a company that was in a way forcing me to do that. And so it was time for me to move on. And so I do feel like I finished, but I finished for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. I like that little twist in terms of what does finish mean? Just as you said with success, what does success mean for you? And I always say that to people. Success is defined by you individually. What does success mean for you? For some people, it's getting up this morning, right? It's being able to, turn on the TV and have lights in your house, right? So success is different for everyone. And when you were talking about, creating this space, it's one of the reasons that I started Ladies Who Leverage, was to be able to create like a safe space for female entrepreneurs. And at the time when I started Ladies Who Leverage, it was really more all encompassing in terms of just women, right? Professional women too, to be able to have a space where they could ask for the things that they wanted and that they needed, and not feel judged, not feel that, oh my gosh, if I say this, somebody's going to think, well, you should know that, you're stupid, or, whatever. And, it has evolved over time so that it's now more structured, and I want it to be, a little, it's more focused. But like you said, you finish pieces, you finish like that thing. So the way Ladies Who Leverage was, I finished that, right? I created that space. And then now, as of December, we started a new space, right? Because now I'm thinking, okay, there's a different vision, right? And so you have to then go on that journey and see where that journey takes you. And I think that's such an important lesson for the viewers and listeners to understand that finishing what you start doesn't mean that you go from A to Z. It might be that you go from A to G to M to, right? But it's finishing the journey, your journey.
And your success will, and what it means to be successful, will change over time. Success takes on different definitions, which you just said, it means something different for everyone, but it also will mean something different for you as you're going about your journey. Like success one day might look like a certain way, and then in a week from now you might define success in a different manner. So I think it just, you have to be okay with your own success evolving.
Yeah. And before we go, I want to go back to the $500 and the whole notion that people think that you need millions of dollars, or you need to have like so much money to build and to succeed. And, you started, like you said, with $500 and a baby in your belly. So I just want you to hit on that before we wrap up.
Yeah. So, I mean, the $500 was really to start my website. That's what I used it for. But, I had a business idea that did not require capital. I was not producing a product. So I think that's really important to note that, because if I had a product, it would be a whole different ballgame. But obviously, with technology and marketing, those costs also could add up. But in the beginning, the goal was just to be profitable. And I wanted to leverage every single free way that I could to be profitable. And so what were those things, and what are those things now? Because now I think then social media offered you a lot more exposure for free. But now I think there's a wider platform for you to do so. So I guess it's the lesser of two evils, I suppose. But, so when you think about it, the $500, it was for my website. And then what I did was I borrowed people's audiences. I went to other brands, other stores, different partners who also were reaching expectant parents. And I was like, let's partner. And I always tell my clients to do that. Whose audience can you leverage? Who can you partner with that you offer them something and they offer you something? That was the backbone of my business. I went to a prenatal fitness studio and I went to a maternity store. And those were my first two events. Well, guess what? Each of those entities had a whole database of women. And then I started working with them. And then I started reaching out to brands. And then I said to the brands, okay, well, now I have this database of like 500 expectant parents in Chicago. Don't you want to get in front of them? And then you would put the brand name on things. And so that would give you even more clout. And it's really, what I'm trying to emphasize here is it doesn't happen all at once, but it's a step-by-step approach. And you layer it onto what it was that you just did and reinvest back into your business. Like I didn't pay myself probably for the first year, maybe even more than that. I paid my first employee before I paid me. But I mean, everything I did was investing back into the business to make the business bigger. And, that's how I grew it. And then ultimately, you know, we ended up having paid sponsors and I was able to pay myself. But, you know, it took some time. But I always tell people you have to look at the free options and how can you leverage those options to grow your business, whether it's social media, partnerships. I will tell you, I tell all of my clients, I ask all of my clients, the first question I ask them, did you send an email to everyone you know? 9 times out of 10, they say no.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I, to this day, am reaping the residual effect off the email I sent in September that I was starting my own consultancy. I sent an email to everyone I knew, and I still am getting people from time to time reach out to me saying, hey, you know, I wasn't in the market for you then, but now, you know, I'm wondering what kind of services do you provide? Because I might need some help with some social media or content. You have to tell people, just tell them what you're doing, because you don't know where they're at and when they might need to hire you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I could talk to you forever, Lindsay. So we're going to have more conversations.
We'll have to, because I could talk to you forever too. I mean, even before we hopped on this, we were like chit-chatting away.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want everyone to follow you and subscribe to your podcast. So that's Dear Founder. But if they want to talk to you, found her. So FOUNDHER, found her. If they want to contact you, because I know you have I think a boot camp that's coming up coming up pretty soon. So if they want to contact you, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You could email me at Lindsay at lindsaypinchuk.com. You can find me on Instagram at Lindsay Pinchuk. It's me. I respond to all the DMs, or you can just go to my website, lindsaypinchuk.com, and there's a contact me, and there's the boot camps also listed there as well.
Awesome. And all of this will be in the show notes. And Lindsay, just so that you know, is Lindsay.
Yep.
So just make sure that you spell that, and Pinchuk, Pinchuk, but it will all be in the show notes. So Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Again, I tell you, I curate these episodes so that we make sure that we have the best guest out here. And so continue to listen. Make sure that you subscribe. We drop our episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for you women who are listening, who are female entrepreneurs, and you are thinking about, I really need to take my business to the next dimension, and I want to learn how to build my business brand, my business badassery, then I want you to apply to join Ladies Who Leverage. We are an exclusive application and invite only community. And really, I am here to help you win. So as your mentor, I will help you to strategize. I will make sure that you're intentional, and I'll also help you to not just show up, but show out, because as an entrepreneur, it takes your whole self to be successful. So if you'd like to join Ladies Who Leverage, go to lwlcollab.com, and I will see you on the inside, hopefully. But in the meantime, go unleash your badassery and live life unapologetically AF. Take care. Thank you for joining us. This podcast has been brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. Make sure that you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you are a female entrepreneur or business owner and you're looking for a safe, supportive ecosystem to create and share ideas and information, build a thriving business, and live life unapologetically AF, then I'd invite you to apply to Ladies Who Leverage. We're an exclusive community of badass female entrepreneurs. So if that sounds like you, go to www.lwlcollab.com. That's LWLCOLLAB as in boy.com, so that you can apply to join us in our amazing badass network. And until then, I want you to unleash your badassery and live life unapologetically AF.